are about to hear may scare you. If you are not ready for information that will not only change your worldview, but perhaps your life completely, then you should turn off this video now. An event with profound implications takes place in September 2015, a 3,000-year-old mystery called the Shemitah. Some are aware of it, most aren't. Financial elites on Wall Street call it the end of a 7-year cycle. What they either don't know or won't say, however, is that these endings are historically disastrous, and this one may be even worse. There are signs, both economic, financial, and military, that this September 2015 could change everything about the way we live and work and even survive. Unfortunately, while Shemitah may formally end in September, its ramifications could expand with considerable destructiveness. While many are not aware of the specifics, people are uneasy. A Washington Examiner article reported that 72% in a recent poll feared an economic crash, and that those expressing concern were at the highest level ever. Please watch this video to understand what you need to know and how to take action to protect yourself and your loved ones.
And the amount of bizarre things scheduled for this coming September is what convinced me something is being planned for this fall.
Yes. Everything you've covered so far is the past. Let's talk about the present and near future.
Well, I decided to begin looking up the days on or around September 13th of this year to see if I could find any interesting events, and it didn't take long before I found numerous events, all happening on or around that date of major significance. The first thing I found was that the United Nations opens its 70th session of the UN General Assembly on September 15th in New York City. World leaders from around the world will be attending. They call it their Jubilee session. Now, I didn't mention this yet, but every 7th Shemitah, or in other words, every 7th 7-year period, or after every 49 years, is called the Jubilee year, every 50 years. In the Jubilee, according to Jewish religion, it is the year when God, supposedly, gives back land taken away from their ancestors to them. Of note, in the last Jubilee, in 1967, Israel won the 7-Day War when Israel defeated Jordan and captured the West Bank, defeated Egypt and captured the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula, and defeated Syria and captured the Golan Heights. Looking even further back to the prior Jubilee year in 1918, the British Empire took back Jerusalem from the Turkish Ottoman Empire. And so in both prior Jubilee years, there was a major development in Israel. The next Jubilee year starts on September 14th of this year. As well, in September, the UN plans to launch a new plan for managing the entire globe called the Sustainable Development Summit from September 25th to 27th. Some of the biggest names on the planet, including Pope Francis, will be speaking at this summit. The focus of this plan is to expand the scope of global governance. Global governance can also be defined as one world government or a new world order. The Pope, interestingly enough, will be busy in the U.S. all of September, as on September 15th, the Pope will also be speaking at the UN, and then on September 24th, he'll also be speaking at the U.S. Congress. The next thing I notice is that Jade Helm, a massive, unprecedented rollout of the U.S. military inside of the U.S., runs from July 15th until September 15th. This is particularly interesting in that there always seems to be a drill being run by the government during when an actual crisis occurs. Jade Helm has already begun in preparations, and the amount of military equipment being amassed in the U.S. is truly mind-boggling. There's a lot of speculation that this amount of military buildup in the American South is in preparation for some sort of civil unrest. That speculation built when a number of Walmart stores recently closed on the same day across the southern U.S. with no notice due to plumbing problems and are said to remain closed for 6 months. This fueled speculation that it's to be used for some sort of detention center for unrest. They said they wouldn't reopen for 6 months, which just happens to be after September. But it gets stranger and stranger. Recently, the New York-based Federal Reserve announced it's moving its operations outside of New York to Chicago because of concerns about a natural disaster. One might ask, what natural disaster are they expecting in New York that they aren't expecting in Chicago? Then, after the Fed's recent Federal Open Market Committee meeting, it took the highly unusual act of removing all calendar references from its post-meeting statement. Normally, in the post-meeting statement, they include calendar events for upcoming important dates like the next meeting. This time they didn't, and they just alluded that a date range for their long-awaited 0.25% rate hike, which alone can almost teeter the entire financial and monetary system loaded with debt, would likely be in the fall. But while they didn't put any dates of future meetings in their post-meeting notes, they do have dates on their website of upcoming meetings. According to their site, the next meeting will be held just after the Shemitah on September 16th and 17th. Meanwhile, the U.S. federal government is buying another 62 million rounds of ammunition commonly used in AR-15s for training purposes, and NORAD announced that it is moving back into the Cheyenne Mountains because it is EMP hardened, leaving one to ask why NORAD is moving into the mountains to protect against a major attack at this time.
It certainly appears as though a lot is happening, all surrounding this September.
Absolutely, and the list of strangeness goes on and on. There was the strange 7-minute speech by Christine Lagarde of the IMF talking about numerology and the number 7 that she made in January of last year. She started the speech by saying, "As you can tell, I do what I'm told." And she went on to say, "I want to test your numerology skills on the magic number 7. Most of you know that is quite a number."
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. As you can tell, I do as I'm told. Numerology skills, by asking you to think about the magic 7. Okay? Most of you will know that 7 is quite a number in all sorts of themes, religions.
That's a strange speech about numerology and the number 7 coming from the managing director of the IMF. There was also French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, who made a bizarre speech in 2014, stating that we are on the edge of a climactic abyss.
We are, all of you know it, on the edge of a climatic abyss. In fact, we have 500 days to avoid a climate chaos.
Out of curiosity, I added up the days from that speech, and 500 days from it lands on September 23rd, 2015. Yet no one questioned him why 500 days exactly. You can find many more examples like this. Everything seems to be gravitating towards this September. Something's going on. What that is anyone's guess.
You want to take a guess?
There's too many variables to make a solid guess, but this is far too many coincidences that all seem to point to something massive happening around September of this year. Also, there's Martin Armstrong, who was jailed for having a computer model that amazingly predicts the fall of currencies, markets, and even nations, predicted 20 years ago that there will be a massive system reset, collapse, or crisis on October 1st, 2015. If you listen to the actions of the Fed, they seem to be worried about some sort of natural disaster to happen in the New York area. If you listen to NATO, they appear to be preparing for an EMP attack. If you pay attention to the US military, they are apparently preparing for a massive amount of unrest inside the US. And if you pay attention to the UN, September seems to be a very busy month with leaders from around the world, including the Pope, attending numerous major events. In fact, we've already seen the first rumblings of a coming collapse happening in both Greece and China. The Shanghai stock market has already begun to collapse, falling more than 30% in the last 2 months, and the Chinese Nasdaq fell 40% in the last 3 weeks. And in Greece, the banks and stock market have been closed for weeks, and they're laying the foundation for a civil chaos that I expect to fully foment over the summer and explode in September. This will set off a chain reaction that will shake the entire US dollar-based financial system. This is enough evidence for me not to be anywhere near the US from now until at least October, and specifically in the month of September. This is just too much happening all at once for my comfort. I've also been advising for years to have no significant assets in US dollars and certainly not in the US bank, And I reiterate that more so now, based on what I see happening in the coming months. If I'm totally wrong and nothing major happens during that period, then great. It's really not of any harm to prepare for some catastrophic event in the financial and political systems during that time, because my advice for preparing for the end of the monetary system as we know it is the same for this September period as it has been for the last few years and still continues to be. I'm just getting more adamant on it now.